Daniel Andrews, meanwhile, forced to defend his decision today to cancel the Commonwealth Games. He has been slammed across the board for this move, left and right, young and old. Swimming legend Grant Hackett savaged Andrews, saying that at first he thought the news was a joke.
This is not the local bowls club cancelling a weekend meet. I mean, this is something of such a significant nature and so hard to get these sorts of events in your own country. It's deflating for not just the athletes, but the entire country, and particularly the state of Victoria.
The Australian Financial Review's editorial today said, surely this is the last straw for Daniel Andrews and the madness of his left-wing populist governing model in excessively locking down the state during the pandemic while racking up debt on one spending monument after another. They say the latest result of abruptly cancelling the Games with almost 300 events and 5,000 athletes now puts the whole Andrews shambles on the global stage, and it does. Foreign Affairs editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan, writes today that the Premier is a sovereign risk to his own state. He says in terms of debt and credit rating, it's the worst performing government in Australia with a tendency to authoritarianism that resembles Enid Blyton rewritten as a socialist dystopia. And former Foreign Minister Julie Bishop said the decision to scrap the Com Games astounded her. She says he is sending a message to the Commonwealth countries that Australia cannot afford to host a Games, yet we would expect a developing Commonwealth nation to host it. She says, is this Premier from one of the wealthiest countries on the planet signalling the death knell of this sporting contest?
If there wasn't a proper basis for hosting the Commonwealth Games, why did you get us into this mess in the first place? A mess that's now going to cost us somewhere between $1 and $2 billion to get out of because of his incompetence.
My understanding is the police force here in Victoria has told the government they could not provide the security in those 4 regional locations for the Commonwealth Games. There was no accommodation for them. We don't have enough police, and we couldn't move them on a daily basis from any other part of the state to those 4 locations. So from a security point of view, the police were totally stretched and it was beyond their capacity to provide the security required.
More criticism there, as you saw, from the Victorian opposition leader John Pesutto and former Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett. And today, the Prime Minister said this cancellation of the Games had been on the cards for a while, but it looks like Daniel Andrews told Anthony Albanese, but not the Commonwealth Games Federation. The organisers of the Games said the Victorian government had repeatedly assured them that it could meet the costs of hosting the event, and they gave no prior warning before they withdrew from its contract. That, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. And they're now likely to sue the Andrews government. Already negotiations have started in London for compensation, but Andrews refused again and again and again today to comment on how much it would cost Victoria to cancel the Games. Both the Commonwealth Games Australia Chief Executive Craig Phillips and the Com Games Federation Chief Executive Katie Seidler, they both said that Victoria had willfully ignored recommendations that could have reduced costs, such as using existing sporting facilities in Melbourne. They also cast doubt on Daniel Andrews' claims that the costs had blown out to $6 or $7 billion. The implication here from these senior and credible chief executives is that he's either lying or exaggerating the costs. Just last month at a board meeting, the Andrews government reportedly told the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee that the estimated cost of hosting the Games was similar to the original budget of around $2.6 billion. That's according to The Australian today. And Daniel Andrews has refused to explain where these figures come from when he cites the $6 or $7 billion. He refuses to say who did the modelling and how they could have blown out by such an exorbitant amount. Former Queensland Premier Peter Beattie made the point today that these contracts are really hard to get out of and there'd likely be a substantial price to pay.
And yet this is a reward, it's a building block, as in Cathy Freeman's case. It's also an opportunity for Australians to participate. So, look, it does have a particular role, but they are costly, and the issue is who can afford it, and that's why it's been going between Australia and the UK.
The whole thing is farcical, but the almost funny part of it is that the whole world is now seeing the gaslighting, the stonewalling, the bizarre logic of Daniel Andrews. Asked today if he should apologise, and there's a lot of people who he owes an apology to: the Commonwealth Games, the young athletes crushed after pouring their hearts into training morning and night, the parents of the athletes who have given up so much and paid so much for coaches to train their kids, to the regional towns and their local businesses who are looking forward to such a big economic boost. Well, Daniel Andrews at first seemed like he was about to apologise, but then he clarified that, no, actually, he was not sorry.
Of course, I'm sorry that we find ourselves here. Right? I'm sorry that we are in this position. But I'm not going to apologise for not taking money out of hospitals and schools. But the easy thing to do is just push on. You're asking me to apologise for cancelling the games, and I'm not doing that.
It's almost shocking to watch his patronising attitude. No humility, no contrition, just hubris. And what's worse, he tried to dress the entire thing up as a positive announcement for schools and housing and hospitals. The master of spin, he stood up today to announce $150 million for housing, part of his message that he's dumping the Com Games to spend money on schools and housing.
I will not take money out of hospitals and schools in order to fund an event that is 3 times the cost as estimated and budgeted for last year.
As one person said to me today, he is Stalin-esque in his deceit. He can't try to spin this as him doing a great thing for housing or hospitals. What rubbish. What we are seeing here is a clear, broken promise on the basis of sloppy costings and a state in a debt crisis. Debt forecast to reach $171 billion by 2027. And for once, the media in Melbourne weren't buying Andrew's spin. The journalists did a great job of holding him to account.
Well, no, you are making it. No, I'm terribly sorry. You are putting to me, you are asserting things as fact. As fact. I'm just asking who was responsible. No, that's not. But no, I'm sorry. That's not what you're doing at all. That's not what you're doing at all. You have been told something, and you are now putting that to me. So tell us who was responsible for that. No, I think we've already been there. I'm not going to respond to claims that have been made. This is quite extraordinary.
And virtually every journalist at that press conference today asked tough questions of their Premier. Don't forget, this is crushing, heartbreaking for the athletes involved, but also for the thousands of other families affected by this, whose children were pumped, primed to watch their favourite sport in their hometown. It went so far as to see the opposition today calling Daniel Andrews a con man.
Regional Victoria now just feels like they're being played by a con man.
The fact that Dan Andrews, through his incompetence, through his minister's incompetence, through his government's incompetence, has put a nail in the coffin of the Commonwealth Games, I think that's unforgivable.
It's astonishing to think that just 15 months ago, Daniel Andrews celebrated that his state would be hosting the Games. Games he had bid for.
The Victorian Government has just signed an exclusive negotiation agreement with the Commonwealth Games Federation to host the 2026 Commonwealth Games. This exclusivity speaks to the fact that we are the sporting capital of our nation. We have all that is needed to make an event like this a fantastic success for us and for everybody right across the Commonwealth.
What a joke. Now, he could very well be blamed for killing off one of the great sporting events in Australia's history, an event that saw the careers of the likes of Cathy Freeman and Ian Thorpe take off. Now the Games are in doubt, with no host city for 2026. There's talk they may not go ahead at all. It's cynical, yet realistic, to suggest that the reason Daniel Andrews announced the Games for regional Victoria was to win votes in marginal seats ahead of the state election. Several political commentators have said that the goal of running the Commonwealth Games in 5 regional centres was a political strategy designed to maximise Labor's vote, Andrews' vote, in crucial seats. The model was never the best financial one, with temporary facilities needed to be built from scratch rather than using the existing sporting infrastructure already built in Melbourne. Andrews now can't get away with blaming the Games officials or anyone else. This is his appalling running of the state, his mishandling of the budget, his cost blowouts that mean he couldn't afford to host the Games, and he has bungled the entire process while threatening the future of a long-running event. As John Coates told me last night, this is a terrible embarrassment for Australia. How embarrassing do you think this is to us internationally?
Well, it's particularly embarrassing for the Australian people who are part of the Commonwealth Games movement, and it will be for the sports themselves as well. So it's, yeah, there's an embarrassment there. There's no doubt about that.